Howdy folks, Grotto Goblin here of the Goblin's Grotto, and welcome to a quick overview of the newest Kickstarter campaign from Reaper Miniatures, the Dungeon Dwellers Role-Playing Game, or DDRPG. This is a Reaper Miniatures published alternative to, traditional TTRPGs that kind of takes some stuff from old school TTRPG systems, like such as old school D&D, or the sort of revamped so-called old school D&D, and adds in some more modern concepts from a few other famous alternative games to Dungeons and Dragons or Pathfinder and things of that sort. So, as someone who primarily collects and paints miniatures, I have a kind of narrower interest in this overall, but, I have played some role-playing games in my time, and it is still something I'm very interested in, so let's just give this a little look over, though, given that I only have so much access to this material anyway, I can't really say too much about like how fun it is, or whether the rules are the best of the best or anything like that. But just give some general thoughts, and of course talk about some miniatures, because there are indeed miniatures. So, as you can see right now, today is November 1st, 2023. There's 17 days to go. We're 762 backers, and they've surpassed their goal. So, failure to complete, at least from a checkbox perspective, is not a worry with this one. This is going to end Saturday, November 18th, 2023 at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time, which is where they are based. As they are based in Denton, Texas. Miniatures, if you didn't know that. Alright, so let's get into things. So, Dungeon Dwellers is something that's been in the works for a while. See, sort of the reference to the old school Renaissance or OSR games. It takes a lot of things that you would find in D&D in various iterations, and kind of twists and simplifies some things and adds a few other new mechanics as well. From the previous times that this has been shown off, because this is not the first time we've heard of this, it was prominently featured in some of the Bones 6 Kickstarter material at one point. There was even a live stream demonstration of this game, and several miniatures that Reaper has been putting out lately have direct ties to this game, either as NPCs or monsters that you fight, or even characters that you can play. So, there are, a few free things like this PDF adventure that you can find here. I recommend just coming to the page, and if you want to look at the free stuff, just, come look at it yourself. It would be a lot to kind of go over in this, and, unfortunately I haven't had a game group to get together and, run this stuff, so I can't tell you playtest wise how fun it is, but I do certainly enjoy simplified TTRPGs. As fun as things like D&D and Pathfinder is, those can get pretty complicated pretty quick, especially Pathfinder. I found there's a lot of math involved with it, and I'm not a mental math person. So, yes, this is, generally speaking, stripped down and simplified. It's not to say that there's not complex stuff going on here, but anyway, so this is the overall fundamentals of the system. I think, excuse me. I think this breaks things down pretty well. Although it does I do have a few questions. I have read this over. So 4 core classes. Yeah, fighter, cleric, rogue, and wizard. So certainly you might think, oh, that's not a lot. I will say that you can do a lot with these 4 if your system is just these 4. Because, cleric, you can say, well, what about paladins? Well, a paladin is like a really tough buff cleric, I guess, Fighter, they can cover rangers and all sorts of stuff. rogue, that's all your assassin types, like wizards. You can also be sorcerers and all that kind of stuff. So if the system was completely limited to this, and I'm not saying that it is, they very well could add stuff on. These are only the core classes after all. You could definitely take these and just sort of expand them. And I think that's probably what they're going for with this. But, as far as core classes go, I think these mostly cover the general vibes that you're looking for. As for the core folk, and I will say I do kind of prefer folk. Folk is a good alternative when you're talking about different types of people, such as other terms like race or species. Race, carries a lot of baggage, and species is a little more clinical. I use that from time to time just to be very clear about what I'm talking about, because folk does, also you can just say that to talk about different cultural groups, but in this case, folk is talking about human, halfling, elf, and dwarf. The delineations here are kind of interesting. It's a pretty common thing with fantasy settings where humans are just humans. They acknowledge that there's a mosaic of different types of humans, but then when it comes to the other groups, it'll just be it'll be halfling, but it's this specific type of halfling, or elf, but actually it's wood elf, or dwarf, it's still dwarf. So interesting delineations with these three, because it kind of implies that there are other groups of these types of peoples. So these folk. All right, pretty common 6 ability score system. A 20-sided die is rolled, and you use ability checks and things determined from your background, your folk, and your class. Now, some people may take some issue with the essentially your folk, your species, so to speak, giving you modifiers and things like that. I will say, in general, if between humanoids, it probably wouldn't make too much of a difference whether or not you're, an elf or a human in most cases. But I suppose, and though it's not listed here, if you were to play something like a faun or a centaur, it's going to be a lot different than playing, halfling or a gnome, just because there are physiological differences. But at the same time, should that be reflected heavily in gameplay? Maybe not. Not saying that that's the case here, but it is notable that this is not a system where it will be ignored what folk you choose. But just keep that in mind. All right, renovated spell system. From everything that I've seen, it seems like they tried to just kind of distill things down into archetypes. So instead of 100 different individually listed spells with specific effects, although that there are certainly some of those, it's more just archetypical spells that get broken down. This right here, I think, is the biggest thing that people will focus on, and people who like the old school rules tend to gravitate towards this sort of style of play, and I will say it's very combat focused. Certainly there are RPG elements and all sorts of things like this. You can make stories out of anything, but certainly this is geared towards combat, this feature here. So when hit points are exhausted, a creature is likely to die when hit points are reduced to below 0. Combatant has till the end of the round to stabilize or they die. There are no death saves in DDRPG. So this definitely is the I would say dungeon running type of game system where your characters die and that's okay, makes me think of something like Dwarf Fortress where losing is part of the fun. You build up your fortress, and things go wrong, and that's okay. At the same time, this is tough for some people to swallow, just because people get attached to their characters and they don't want them to die. Obviously, nobody wants to die. So it doesn't mean that it shouldn't be a possibility, but at the same time, how quick should it happen is more the question. So, yeah, I don't know. I imagine at some games this will maybe get some modifications. Perhaps maybe there's one round of unconsciousness I would add in, just in like a personal game, and then the next round you will die. Like, you'll go unconscious, one round will play out, no save, and then you'll die. Maybe that's my modification to this, but this is a perfectly valid system and rule. But yeah, this is definitely highlighting the dangers in this. And then they talk about the compatibility. Stuff like this is just, there's not like a whole thing around this. It's just like a house rule, basically. So you could just add that to any game. It doesn't have to be specific to DDRPG. So yeah, I would say this is kind of plug and play with a lot of things. But all right, so let's look over the campaign, see what we get now that we know a little bit about the basics of the system. So here we have a player's guide that's going to be coming with it. Some nice little art on the cover. 128 plus pages. It's pretty standard length. Depending on some systems, it could be kind of long or kind of small, but I imagine a good bit of this is going to be taken up by like creatures and things like that, and like how to create characters. And plus, since this is a new product, they got to get all the headway on what you have to do to learn how to actually play the game. So, yeah, here we have a table of contents, just sort of giving you the general gist of what is in this. Obviously, some of this could change, but for the most part, this will probably be very close to how things actually come out. I don't know if this is the full table of contents. It might continue after this, but who can say? There are no page numbers on this, so this is clearly a rough draft. But just giving a look over, it seems like they have a good little introduction, and then they go over the character creation. And if I am looking at this correctly, those core folk here are all that is listed in character creation. There's something to be said about, like, if you look at something like the player's handbook for D&D, there's certainly more than 4, though they add on with further expansions and supplemental books. But 4 is kind of small as far as things go. As far as the actual selection, just kind of circling back to that, it is kind of interesting that there isn't. You're very sort of in the traditional humanoid. Like, obviously there's humans, and then the other 3 are just kind of like a human but short, a human but their ears are pointy, a human but they're short and buff. Those kind of humanoids in games are very kind of like Tolkien-esque. But then you have humanoids like, a quote-unquote beast folk type humanoid, where it's like a satyr or a fawn. I mean, you can say, oh, it's a human with a goat feet. Yeah, but there's a little something else other than just the standard body plan. So maybe there could be some expansion into the more interesting sort of non-standard sorts with this. And of course, you got sections about what kind of gear you can have, how combat works. There is a lot of stuff talking about combat, it seems. And then the spell section is also fairly long, but not nearly as long as as just the combat in general. As we can see here, though, if I zoom in real quick, it's starting to get less blurry, unfortunately, because Kickstarter works with uploading images, but besides the point. They do have concepts like schools of magic, cantrips, and blessings. So I imagine blessings is probably something more for clerics and stuff like that. Maybe as an alternative to cantrips, or maybe like little passive bonuses. Interesting. Civil class. Yeah, this is all pretty straightforward and the type of thing I would see. Temple ties. The fact that it gets its own section, that's very interesting. Wills and funerary expenses. Yeah, so that right there really tells me that, your characters are going to die. There was that whole, no death saving throw type thing. And this just, I feel like, nails it in that, yeah, your characters are probably going to die. Like, it's okay. Like, this is a dungeon running type thing. It's a very combat focused type game. I mean, the combat and movement section is seemingly the longest, or maybe the second longest by character creation section here. So that makes sense to me. This tracks. So all right, so that's the player's guide, the game master's vault. This would be your dungeon master guide. Typical sort of thing that you would expect for any TTRPG system in terms of what it gives to the people actually running the game. It's going to have lots of behind the scenes stuff, so to speak. Same length as the other one, it seems. And then you have essentially your monster manual. This is all the denizens of the dungeon. This is going to have all of the monsters. So I'm sure there's going to be some like creatures and NPCs and stuff in here. This is any indication, but as far as your general enemies and monsters, you'll look to the denizens of the dungeon. As far as new monsters here, because there have been some stuff released to this. They're adding some other things like the axolotls. Those, if you remember from the fan favorites in Bones 5, there were some little axolotl characters, like little people. Guess they're being listed as monsters here. Potentially problematic if you think about it, because they are seemingly sentient beings, but it's neither here nor there. I do see that they have an owl bear listed here. That's a open game license situation there, as they, as far as I'm aware, Wizards of the Coast and Dungeons and Dragons, they kind of have the rights to owl bear specifically, so this is probably falling under various elements of the open gaming license. So, not to dig that drama back up, but that's how this stuff like this is possible. Great artwork there, by the way. And so now we're getting into the progress of the campaign. So those are your basic, like the books that you'll get. You get these digitally or as PDFs or physical copies, it seems. So here's the progress we've seen so far. As you can see, yes, there are miniatures to this. Just for, I guess, Halloween. We got some skeletal warriors. So, yeah, pretty standard, pretty good skeletal warriors. I like that they're not just skeletons walking around with weapons. I feel like I see that a lot. But people tend to not just die naked, and so to speak. So it is nice to see, clothes like a soldier or a peasant, and just kind of picking up weapons. Another recent unlock, we have the Westboro Wraith. Pretty cool looking. I like that it doesn't look like, Wraiths, assumingly very scary, but it doesn't necessarily seem hostile. It could just be, a friendly ghost rising up out of a grave. But, it's not, it doesn't scream, I'm evil. So you can use it in a couple of different contexts, I think. Here's some other things. here. This looks like it's a little source book. They're explaining the setting. Pretty neat art style. Kind of reminds me of some of the Pathfinder cover art. And this is our next unlock, the Ogre. Listing that it's large. I like this little earring here. Pretty neat. But, it's an ogre. I have to say the sculpting is pretty top notch, and I've come to expect that of Rupert miniatures at this point. Alrighty, so here is our little map showing some of our progress. Talk about the cartography, who made it. There may be multiple other maps hidden, but those are yet to see unlocks yet. I don't know what that is. So it says ogre, but I don't know what that is. That doesn't look like an ogre to me. So I don't know if these really correspond to anything, because it also says goblins over here, and then there's like a little fish guy. I don't know. I don't know that any of this art really corresponds to anything. I mean, there's a dragon down here and all that, but as somebody who's primarily interested in miniatures, I don't know if this campaign is really following like a teaser format for the minis. All right, moving on. All right, here is some of the options for pledges. We have the collector's box. That seems like it will be your all-in type thing. It'll come with the 3 rule books and the print edition. And then you have some PDFs here. We'll get some special dice. And these PDFs, it looks like, are just PDFs of these, so you'll have both copies. A pretty good practice, but I wouldn't, I wouldn't count these as individual bonuses necessarily. I mean, it's good to have 2 copies, but I wouldn't like if this was $25 and this was $10, I wouldn't count this as $30 of value. It's just like, well, this is just copies. Anyway. Some dice, and it is a full set of dice. So, to be clear, even though it seems like the D20 will be the core die you'll be using, you are still going to use the other dice occasionally. So, let's see, 8 cardstock fortune tokens. That's interesting. 4 iconic hero miniatures, and I have to say, look at these minis. They are pretty great. The detail on here is pretty outstanding. If these are anything like what we would actually be getting, I quite like the spread here, and this does seem to reflect the different classes. So you have a human fighter here. It's like a lady with a sword, shield, carrying a lot of gear, and some gear on her back. I think you can just tell that that's a crossbow that's around the top there. I don't know how you'd be able to access that during a fight, really, but either way, it's nice to have. So you got your fighter representation. There's dwarf over here, big dwarven shield, and hammer. Yeah, this could easily also be a fighter, but I think they're going for cleric over here. Cleric of what? I don't know. It probably may be something that's on the face of that shield, but I quite like the expression here. It's very iconic dwarf. They are right to call them iconic heroes. We have our halfling rogue, classic class and folk combo, and then an elf wizard over here. Again, another classic combo. I'm a big fan of this book sitting in its little carrying case here. Kind of curvy dagger, spells charging up there, and then that looks like it might be some kind of like scroll case there. So that's pretty cool. I am looking at these and I am predicting that these are going to be in the Bones USA print material. Maybe it says somewhere. or maybe they haven't quite decided yet, but I'm just looking at these models and I'm going to go ahead and assume that they are the same material that is getting used a little bit in Bone 6 and in any of the like monthly bonuses whenever you order from their website over a certain amount and you get like a little free miniature. That's what they're made of, the Bones USA print material, and this looks like that. So okay, in terms of other things, you got this monster, this sort of carnal grub, sort of carrion crawler type thing. Pretty gnarly looking. An interesting large monster to start things off with. It's pretty cool, but it's nothing like, whoa. So it's that. Got a little, looks like a kobold themed encounter. Some goblins, and if you're looking, if you're looking at this little quartet here and you're seeing something very familiar, yes, this was one of the promo goblins before Bone 6. Interestingly enough, didn't appear in Bone 6. Yeah, so they moved him to this. So you might already own this goblin, and I was talking about the print material I've already seen and possibly painted and all that. Like, well, you're familiar with this. So we just have a couple other variants on this guy, all in the sort of surfboard bases. I kind of go back and forth on that shape. On the one hand, I think it covers up less of the terrain, so you kind of see a little more around your character. But on the other hand, sometimes it's good to have a nice little sturdy circle, so your mini's harder to tip over. Just put these on another base, or even clip them off of this base, put them on another. I think clipping them is probably a little risky, though. But yeah, so they're definitely going with the surfboards going forward. Either way. Okay, Beneath the Fortress of Peril Part 1. So that's an interesting decision to do kind of unlocks in parts. Because if you don't get to the latter parts, then I guess you just get left on red. I don't know. You just don't get to complete everything. But it's interesting to see. Seems like it'll be very undead themed. Fittingly, it's then followed up by those 4 skeletons we saw earlier and the wraith. And it's not listed here because it's not unlocked yet technically, but you would also get the ogre and any other further unlocks. So that is essentially the all-in pledge. The collector's box, it'll just come with everything you need for this. Including miniatures, all that. Okay, so this is the print edition. So this is what you would get if you want physical copies of the books and stuff before. No miniatures, but you'd get tokens. So that's neat. Digital edition, basically the same thing, except it's all PDFs. Pretty standard. All right, so this is probably where I find my interest and other people's interest. The Dungeon Dwellers Miniature Pledge. So this is miniatures only. So if you really only care about the miniatures, because I'm sure some of us are like, I don't even run games, or I don't actually have people to play with. So do I need to back like $99? Can I have it back $50 and just get all the minis? That's where this would come in for you. So at the moment, there are, let's see, I think 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, and then 15 if you count that ogre that's sitting in the wind. The general cost of this is about at retail, because it's be about like $3, $3.33, somewhere around there. For all of these. So you'd be paying retail price, if not like a little bit below, if you just got this pledge, because Reaper miniatures go anywhere between, in an individual state, the newer ones they're putting out, anywhere between $3.99 to $4.99, sometimes like $6.99. So actually, this is a pretty good deal. I mean, you're not going to see these for a while because they have to go through production and they have to get sent out to you and all that. But overall, it's not a bad deal. It's a good price for miniatures. Whether or not you personally find these specific miniatures worth that, though, that's a question for you to determine whether or not these are useful to you. Personally, if I'm looking at this list, these are fantastic character miniatures or NPC miniatures. The goblins, you can never have too many goblins. I think the designs on these are pretty good, and they all are very cohesive as a unit. They don't stand out too much from each other, so I think, hey, those are pretty great to pick up. The skeletons also, a big, easy win. You can never have too many skeletons. The Wraith is pretty cool as an iconic, ghostly character to deal with. Could be friend, could be foe, could be neither. So these are all, I think, would have a lot of use in any number of adventures. The Carnal Grub, or the Carrion Crawler, whatever you want to call it, this big, ugly worm thing, that one is very sort of specific. You probably won't use it a ton in many different scenarios, but when it comes up, it's a pretty cool mini to have. Granted, I feel like I personally already have a ton of similar type minis, so I don't necessarily need more of them, but it wouldn't hurt to have. So if this is the only large creature, which, if we get that ogre, it wouldn't be, but if this is the only large monster, so to speak, it would be kind of a weird set. Because it doesn't really fit perfectly in with the others, but it is like a cool mini. I don't know if I would have led with it, but it is pretty cool. I do worry about like these little tendrils snapping off, but that comes with any mini, really. If there's like bits sticking off, it's just got proper care and storage. Don't chuck it around the room. You'd probably be fine. So $50 for just the miniatures, plus any future unlocks. These are already at retail price, more or less, if not even below those margins by a couple of dollars. Then this is a pretty good deal. I'd say $50. You're gonna have to wait a while to get them, as I said before, but good deal. And then at the end, after that, there's just some videos and little things to read over if you want to come check this stuff out for yourself. That is all there is to it. So, the Reaper Miniatures Dungeon Dwellers role-playing game. Let me know what you think about this sort of overview. I've shared several of my thoughts as we've been going through this. You can see it's already funded, so at least in the general sense, there's no risk of this not completing. So it's not a dire straits campaign at this stage. But as we've seen, sometimes things go awry. Reaper Miniatures, though, they have a pretty good track record. But that has been traditionally with like full miniature campaigns, more or less. So this is an interesting sort of sidebar for them to just kind of focus in on a rule system that they can use their miniatures in. So let me know what you think in the comments below. If you're going to be backing this, what you think about this kind of direction for Reaper Miniatures. Seems like they've been gearing up for this for a while. A lot of their minis have been in the settings of DDRPG. They've alluded to a lot of characters and adventures, and half the things in Bone 6 were all like in these campaign settings that they've been making for DDRPG. So they're really heading in that direction. So just let me know what you think about this, and obviously if you are backing, just let me know what drew your interest more. Is it the role-playing game or the miniatures itself? And if you're just backing for the miniatures, let me know which one's your favorite. Gotta say, for me personally, it might still be that one goblin with the axe that I unfortunately didn't get. back during the promo stage for Bone 6. But all right, rambled enough. Probably wasn't as quick as intended, but oh well. Yeah. I've been Grotto Goblin. You've been Ewan. Thank you so much for watching. I'm probably going to back this, probably just for the miniatures. So, yeah. Take care. Have a good one. Peace.